GoLongTD.com, humanizing pro football journalism.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Go Long Show here at Go Long and GoLongTD.com. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen. Thank you so very much for making us part of your life. And as always, a special thank you to everybody who subscribes over at Go Long to get all of our features, player profiles, columns, a lot in store for you as training camps near. Jim, it's like 2 weeks away, which is wild. Training camps around the corner. So everyone can expect another round of season preview features. Been spending a lot of time working on those. Cannot wait to share in the podcast, fueled by our good friends at Fatty Beer. Make sure you stop in to a Fatty near you if you live here in Western New York. Jim, good to see you here on the Zoom call. You were here in person Sunday for a little grilling, bringing your ribs to the people. Amazing ribs, I must say.
Thank you, Tyler, and thank you and Gina and Ella and Sonny for being gracious hosts. First-class host. It was a fun party. I think all the kids slept well. I think so. The parents were happy. I'm hoping from your end. I know for my son, it was a good night's sleep. All right, thumbs up. So yes, you know it's funny, Tyler. This time of year, right after this holiday weekend for football, like it always takes me back. I've been out of it now, but I still get antsy, even though you were used to. This was your downtime, quote unquote, in the NFL. You're away. You're on your vacations with your families right now, but you still know it's coming. You know, like just before school's getting ready to start, that's like a couple weeks away. It's on your mind now. You know, it's officially coming it's right around the corner. So even though you're still technically probably on vacation, you're now easing back into the mental preparation of life's about to change.
No doubt. And real quick on that party, I didn't even tell you, Jim, the next morning, the kids slept amazing. Of course.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
Tons of kids running all over the place, wearing each other out. It was great. Sonny, first thing, he's crying and he's asking where Walter is. Where's Walter? Where's Walter? So yes, I think your son and my son are now best friends. So we'll have to continue that, make it a tradition. This time of year I was just talking to an offensive coordinator for, let's just say, an AFC team. And as I'm talking to him, he's like, okay, I just snuck away from the family to catch up. He's got 4 kids. He's on a vacation that isn't really a vacation. So it is a calm before the storm, but I think a lot of these coaches are, they're on vacation, but they're also kind of taking care of kids and getting in that dad time, running around like maniacs and in a different regard before, taking over their 53 kids that they have, at their headquarters.
So to your point, you are 100% correct. There's a major difference between coaches and personnel. Scouts travel by nature, always on the road. You know, we go from hotel to hotel. We're away from our families a lot. So it is like so nice to just be around them, not travel, because that time of year is coming. But for coaches, they're used to that office life. So it gets a little, when they're around their family that much, it's an adjustment. This is speaking from a son of a head coach, college football coach myself. Yeah. So I understand. I could always grow. I could see when the relaxing time was over in his mind. Like he switched gears. You could see it. Okay. Dad switched gears. It's on. It's win-loss time.
Right. Let alone the pressure. Like how much relaxing are some of these coaches doing when maybe they're going into a situation they know they've got to win, they've got to perform this year, or they'll be fired, or they'll be uprooting that family and going to a new city, right? Like that's kind of like the backdrop. So yeah, you're on vacation. Yeah, you're trying to have fun, maybe even sip a little Corona before training camps begin. But I would think that is in your mind as a coach, like that pressure as it gets closer and closer and closer. So it's almost here. It's almost here. I'll definitely be hitting the road, getting to some of these training camps. Going to make it back to St. John Fisher College for the Bills to start things off. But we thought we'd do something a little different here on the podcast. This is your idea, Jim. a fantastic idea. You've got a lot of good ideas. So what we're going to do is identify 3 rookies each that we believe are set up for success. They're going to hit the ground running, and they're going to have fantastic seasons. All right, that's a little hyperbolic, because what we're going to do is we're taking somebody at the top each of the draft, somebody in the middle rounds, and then we'll take a flyer in the 7th round. And we both came up with 3 very different entries, I believe, Jim. So no small talk, no worst people in the world talk, although I'm sure you've run into some out there that aren't returning their shopping carts. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Jim, who are you starting off with? Who is set up to excel in 2024?
So for my 3 selections, I picked a first rounder, mid rounder, 7th rounder. Just let's have some fun with it. So we're going to start with Jayden Daniels. Real, maybe boring pick, but I'm going to say it's not boring because I don't care where you're selected. It's still hard. And his situation, I love. I feel like it has been embraced from the start. The city has embraced him, new coach, new GM, who Adam Peters, this is his first crack, first shot. He gets to get a franchise stamp quarterback coming from San Fran, who we know where they've tried and whiffed. And he was a part of those whiffs, but that's a good thing too. Like, you know, let's see if he's learned. And I feel like they wanted him. They felt good about him from the start. And then you have Dan Quinn. You could tell he wanted another shot at a head job. You could just see it. It always felt like he was bursting out of it. He wanted out of Dallas anyway. They know it. I mean, he wanted to be a head guy. Here it is in the big city. And Jayden Daniels, his story, I think we've talked about it. He was always my second rank from the start. I only thought there were 2 first rounders really worthy, and he was the second one other than Caleb Williams. So I think he is actually, I know it's crazy to say a second pick. Yes, he should be set up for success. I really think he's set up for success. Like this organization. Oh, and I should have started with this, maybe the number one thing. They got rid of that owner. So the core 4 could actually be in place for the first time, in my opinion, for Washington in a long time. You have an ownership that, let's hope they stay out of the way. I mean, I think so far that's their plan. Spend the money, they'll do. Peters and Quinn are synced up, GM, head coach, and you got your rookie franchise guy. Now he has to perform to make that, you know, to be the core quarterback, but it's set up for Washington to make that run.
I know we talk about ownership all the time on this show, but for good reason. Good reason.
It matters.
It matters so much, and it's not discussed nearly enough because they're not out there. They're not speaking publicly. They own these teams, so I guess they can do whatever the hell they want, but they're not mandated to talk, and they don't feel the need to talk. So a lot of these decisions are being made by the owner, yet there's no accountability for said owner. Right. And you mentioned Dan Snyder. I'm thinking back to Wayne Haskins, RIP, right? But a terrible pick and was forced onto the field. And I believe Dan Snyder was the driving force behind Haskins being the quarterback and being the face for the Washington Redskins at that time. Again and again and again. It's no coincidence that the 2 teams that have not made an NFC championship game since 1995 are the Washington Redskins football team Commanders and the Dallas Cowboys. Awful ownership in very different ways. You know, we spent a lot of time talking about Dallas a couple weeks ago, but you're right. The fact that Washington has new ownership, we'll see. It's got to be better, right? You can only go up. And we'll see Josh Harris and his group, how they kind of manage things. It's open-ended. The coaching search was interesting, right? A lot of reporting on all sides of that one came out after the fact. But they got Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, Anthony Lynn. This does strike me as a good coaching staff. And Jayden Daniels is their pick at quarterback. They didn't waste any time. You know, you were in that position where if you've got a new coach, there might be that tendency to, let's wait at quarterback. Let's let our culture be installed and move on from whatever the past was and address quarterback. No, they believed in Jayden Daniels, so they took Jayden Daniels. My question for you is this. Who's his comparison? Because Herm Edwards, who coached him at Arizona State, we had it at Go Long. He thinks that this guy's Randall Cunningham, which I bring up Randall Cunningham because that was a conversation we had on the back deck over the weekend, right? But okay. He sees a 6'4", strong-armed, athletic playmaker that can do a little bit of everything. And look, Herm Edwards didn't even see the best of Jayden Daniels. Like, Jayden Daniels really took off when he was with LSU, obviously. But I kind of know what you're going to say, but hit on that Cunningham-Daniels comparison, whether it fits or not.
I love the compare. I do. We're going to go. I love that Randall Cunningham's coming up right now because Tyler, your brother, wore a shirt to the party on Sunday, a T-shirt with Bryce Paup, with a Bills Bryce Paup. But defensive end for linebacker for the age, wherever we are listener-wise, Bryce Paup was a 90s. Okay.
Defensive player of the year.
Now, I grew up, as you did, a Green Bay Packers fan, and I grew up in central Pennsylvania. It made no sense. We've talked about James Lofton was my favorite player. Okay. Bryce Paup, I was not a Philadelphia Eagles fan. So Bryce Paup as a Green Bay Packer was blamed for injuring Randall Cunningham. There was a big controversy about it. So anyway, it took me back seeing that jersey. And then here you are bringing up Herm Edwards comparing Daniels to Randall Cunningham. So Randall, we know, was a long-armed, just whip it quarterback and run. You know, he wasn't quick release. That release, when you watch his highlights, it's cringeworthy how long his release is. Everything about him was long. He was a long strider. He wasn't a make-you-miss runner, which Jayden Daniels, to Herm Edwards' comparison, is a straight line. He has a little more shape to him than Randall, but we talked about it. He does take shots, and has a frame like Randall where he's longer, not like a running back, like not thick like a running back, more like a linear quarterback. Okay. So the comparison is good to me. He was around both, so I'm not going to sit there and say that's not a fair comparison. What I like about his playmaking skill set, Tyler, it's Lamar. It's Lamar. He's going to beat you with his arm, beat you with his legs. It's that simple for me. He is an absolute nightmare. Simple as that. It is. I really think he's Randall. He's Lamar. He's the guy that we talk about all the time that the other team's defensive coordinator is going to lose sleep at night. He doesn't depend on his legs. That's what I love about these quarterbacks. Lamar, their legs are, yes, that's their gift that we can't relate to. Most people that play football, almost everybody cannot relate to them to have that gift. But those guys don't rely. They are so good throwing the football at this point. They're just nightmares. So yeah, Randall, Lamar.
What's going to be interesting to me is that rushing ability. It will dazzle and it will bring people in. He's going to gain a lot of believers right out of the chute that he is the answer. And think about Washington, that market, how quarterback starved they've been forever. And you know that there's going to be a little stretch from Jayden Daniels that will mirror what we saw out of Justin Fields at times in Chicago, when Justin Fields is lighting the world on fire. And Justin Fields, from day one, Allen Robinson got into this in the series we had at Go Long. Day one, he did not have that processing ability. He could not process a defense. And I think Allen Robinson is speaking for a lot of receivers that have played for a lot of quarterbacks when he says it's not something that you can just learn. That's not something that you can just obtain through reps and coaching, and you can improve a lot, but that ability to process and move your eyes correctly, we don't know if Jayden Daniels really has that. I mean, because then you have a guy like C.J. Stroud where he wasn't really asked to process a lot at Ohio State. He sure as hell had it in year one with Bobby Slowick, it seemed. So, I know Jayden Daniels is going to wow us athletically and do some Lamar stuff. But as a passer from the pocket, that is how you're going to last long term. And maybe we get our answers this year? Maybe we don't, but down those lines, what do you see out of Daniels, Jim?
I think in fairness, when I evaluate him, I think he's probably further along than Lamar was as a passer right now. And I think Lamar is more special of a runner, if that makes sense. So I think Daniels has a little more, I think he's a little bit more pure passer than Lamar. And like I said, Lamar more natural runner. But the playmaking, frightening ability is what they bring. And that's why I'm comparing them both like that. And then
right, you don't want to minimize that. That's special stuff.
It's special. I can't stress it enough.
Draft it and figure it out too.
When you see a guy that everybody's looking around like, I don't want to play against him, you're like, let's talk about him.
Yeah, because that's something that Fields, I don't think, has to that extreme.
No,
for all of his running ability, it's not necessarily breakaway, 0 to 60, see ya, peace out speed. Jayden Daniels has that.
No question. Good comparison. And to touch on your Fields point, because I was a Fields believer coming out, I'd say I'd take a chance on him coming out of that draft. And everybody that questioned his processing, it has not changed. So it didn't improve from Ohio State. It has not improved. It's going to hold him back, from being a special, playmaking quarterback. But you see why people passed on him. But man, that you also see how he can still compete and be a nightmare. But you got to be more than a highlight. You got to be every week.
You've got to be able to take your shirt off and put that picture up on the X to rev up that hype machine, right? That's what Justin Fields did. Russell Wilson. It's that time of year. J.J. Watt just casually caught in the act of flexing with his shirt off, right? Isn't that? I hate when that happens, Jim. Your shirt's off and your muscles are just glistening. And whoops-a-daisy, photo ends up on Twitter and everybody's saying J.J. Watt's making a comeback. I said it on there. Patrick Mahomes, when all these players are posting all these shirtless pictures in July, like Patrick Mahomes needs to put up a picture of himself in the dad bod with his kids, watching Bluey, and just hardware all over the couch, right? Trophies and rings and everything he's got, just lay it all out there. Have your gut hanging out, right? Maybe you're sipping on little microwave coffee because you've been, taking over the parenting duties from Brittany ahead of training camp. That's what we need. That's the picture I'm looking for this time of year.
Certain players, athletes, entertainers have a way of knowing where the camera is. And Tyler, to your point, we didn't grow up having pictures taken of us probably since 9th grade, 10th. Like they're used to being in the media with cameras, and sometimes you get into that. You like it. Now, that's Watt. Now, the Russell Wilson Fields, the X picture you're talking about, the comparison, shirts off, that's when you realize where Father Time is undefeated, where, man, Russell Wilson, no doubt, you're working hard, you're feeling good about yourself, and then you get to compare to the backup young quarterback. And Father Time's going to win that battle. That's when you don't let Sierra see that one.
Yeah. All I know is, Tebow, picture him running off the field with the Jets.
Bodybuilders don't win quarterbacks. I've said it before.
Exactly.
And both those guys, they're boxing, and Fields certainly is starting to look bodybuildish. Like they need to.
All of the greatest quarterbacks of our time. Go right down the list.
I was around McNabb and Breeze. I don't know what else to tell you. I can't think of either time I thought of either one of them. I'm not saying they didn't work hard, but my first thought of either one of them wasn't flexing in a weight room. McNabb and Breeze.
Tom Brady, the iconic combine shot. Aaron Rodgers isn't necessarily ripped at all. Joe Burrow.
Are we waiting to see Brock Purdy?
Peyton Manning.
Are we looking for Purdy?
Yeah, right. I mean, you think it's a flex when you're letting a picture like that kind of go. It's really not. I mean,
and you already said it the best. the number one guy for all. The poster child for this is the guy sitting in Wimbledon nonstop, or the big event with his wife. You said Bluey at home. He does that too. And then he says, hey, we're also going to go overseas quick, check out Wimbledon. I like the way he and Brittany are embracing their off season. It's nice to see people live.
Yes.
Yes. We know what they go, they earn it. Everybody talks about entertainers. I always say football, NFL, professional sports is entertainment. It's just like actors, actresses, that's what they get. We pay to watch them. So let them get away from their craft a little.
Right. You cannot be on 24/7, 365. So I'll drop a little tease for a feature we'll have this week. It was with a defensive player, one of the best linebackers in football, who up until last year was on and angry and mad and pissed all the time. There was a good reason for it. He gets into that good reason. Everything that he's kind of been through off the field blew my mind. I think it'll blow readers' mind, but he wasn't doing any of that stuff up until a year ago. He wasn't enjoying himself. He didn't feel like he could allow himself to enjoy anything, but you've got to, we say it all the time. It's a human game. And when you get into those pressure packed moments, when you've got to deliver with millions upon millions of people watching, you can't be tense. You can't be tight in that moment. And this time of year matters. We've had that debate. I think OTAs and minicamp, there's a purpose for this stuff, no doubt. But especially now when there's nothing going on, you've got to relax, man. You've got to get away and understand it's a marathon. I mean, hell, the Kansas City Chiefs, especially in that division, they're in the AFC West. So, they don't necessarily have to knock heads with other teams in the AFC North, but you just know through September and October, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, they're going to kind of play a little possum, right? Figure it out. What works, what doesn't work. Stephen A. Smith and Skip and the gang, everybody will lose their minds if they're 2-3, and it won't matter. They'll get into mid-November. They'll get into December. They'll start winning games. They'll get into the playoffs, and then they'll be loose. They'll be ready to win. It's a marathon. It's just like those Spurs teams with Popovich at the end, with Duncan, Ginobili, and Parker. You had to screw around for a while, figure it out when they need to. With Golden State, they've kind of got off the rails there. But yeah, I think that there absolutely is if it's a bad visual, the worse the visual as a quarterback, I'm thinking of Patrick Mahomes, with the wind hitting his shirt and you kind of got that side shot of his stuff. The worse the visual, the better the quarterback. Jared Lorenzen should have been a Hall of Famer, really, when you think about it. At 300 pounds in the NFL. If I'm a GM, I'm going for heavy set quarterbacks.
I mean, the fact that he was even playing in the NFL, says how talented he was. I mean,
yeah,
seriously, that's crazy.
Rest in peace.
No, I know.
Yeah.
It's all right. Hey, okay. So I know it's maybe not a fun pick, but I thought we'd go, like we said, who set up for success? Okay. Who you got?
All right. I'll get to mine. Last thought, though. I just had the commander depth chart up. Any thoughts on the personnel around him? So you have Terry McLaurin as your wide receiver one, obviously. Jahan Dotson. They drafted Luke McCaffrey. Tight end's a little bit of a concern. I mean, Zach Ertz, how much does he have left to give? I do like Brian Robinson. He's one of the more underrated running backs. Austin Eckler, they bring him in on the cheap. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on the supporting cast and the players that will be around Jayden Daniels?
Good with it. This is why you draft them. Don't overanalyze it too much. I think it's fine. I like that receiving core. They know they're going to build that line, keep improving, but this is why you take him. This is why you let it happen now. Let it happen. But it is good enough to get off the ground. That's another reason we are taking it. But they can get off the ground running. It's not a complete. They were putting up numbers with Sam Howell.
Yeah.
So
they could be that team with a ton of cap space for 2025 too. If you see enough in Jayden Daniels year one, maybe you barely have to see much at all to justify it, but they're going to take a big swing via trade, via free agency, something. Brandon Ayuk played with Jayden Daniels in college. Could he factor into it? I don't know. I know somebody on that San Francisco staff who was adamant that they would never trade Brandon Ayuk. The Commanders are going to make a big move down the road. So, all right, let's get to my top guy. Not a lot of drama here as well. I'm going Caleb Williams in Chicago, though.
But we're talking about setup for success. Yep.
Yeah.
Setup for success.
Yeah, I don't know of a number one overall pick in NFL history who has walked into a better offense than this. I mean, go right down the list, Jim. Tim Couch with the expansion Browns. David Carr with the expansion Texans. Carson Palmer with the Bengals. Even like Eli Manning, Jamarcus Russell, Matthew Stafford, Sam Bradford, Andrew Luck, Jameis Winston, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield. All of these guys, year one, had something going on. Bad coaching, bad personnel, bad defenses, bad ownership. Now, the Bears aren't without their problems. I'm not saying everything's perfect in Chicago, but in terms of personnel, none of those quarterbacks have stepped into what Caleb Williams will have year one in Chicago. DJ Moore is a top 10 minimum, maybe top 5 wide receiver. Keenan Allen, I know he's getting up there in age. Through all those injuries with the Chargers last year, he was having a career year. And his name always comes up too when you talk to wide receivers around the NFL and route running and who are those players that kind of innovated route running. Stevie Johnson comes up a lot, and Stevie Johnson, he knows Keenan Allen pretty well. Something about that Bay Area. Keenan Allen's route running, I think, has aged so well. I feel like he'll be still, maybe not in his prime, but pretty darn close to it. And then you get Rome Odunze. All right, they benefit from Atlanta going with the Jordan Love plan with Michael Penix. You get Odunze with Cole Kmet, with DeAndre Swift, with an offensive line that's solid. I mean, Darnell Wright, you saw some good things out of him. I know Caleb Williams is going to have to prove he can take those layups and not just bail from the pocket as much as he did at USC. Like we've gotten into on this pod, though, I feel like a lot of that was out of necessity. He had a not good offensive line that was banged up as well and had to bail, had to improvise. We'll see if he can just be patient and win from the pocket and process and do all those things that Justin Fields couldn't, that Mitchell Trubisky couldn't. But man, there's just so much talent around Caleb Williams. I feel like this is a team that can get to the playoffs and win a playoff game. It would not surprise me at all if the 2024 Chicago Bears are the 2023 Houston Texans. And hell, it's throw on any USC game. You've gotten into it. Like, watch Caleb Williams and just don't overthink it. Right? But trust your eyes. These aren't cheap fakes. They're not cheap fakes. That's the term that we're using a lot, right? You don't see him stumbling around out there and not able to formulate a sentence. Better get back on track here.
Clearly,
it was real. Believe what you see in Caleb Williams.
Clearly was the best quarterback in this draft. And I just gave out Jayden Daniels. I just spoke about him, but Caleb was the guy. So to think 1 and 2, that was a great list you read off because they aren't in rebuilding situations. Like those guys you ran off, they were in nightmare like situations. So this is it for Chicago and Washington. This is it. Like, you can't get this right. Now, do you feel like the one thing I was thinking about was Chicago? We're talking about a rookie that's going to be going against their division has 2 ridiculously good teams, like that just started knocking on the door for the Super Bowl, where the Bears are knocking on the door for the playoffs. They're just trying to get established. So I think the Bears are still going to have their struggles I think, just like Washington will too. I mean, I think they're in a division same where the Giants and Philly are kind of a little more Dallas and Philly are a little more established than Washington. So you have two teams ahead of you as rookie quarterbacks in your division. So you have some work to do is my point. I think this is going to be a little harder than people think for Washington and Chicago year one, but I just think let's pay attention. I think they're on the right path.
No doubt. Yeah, I mean, this NFC North is going to be a bloodbath. I think it's the best division in football. AFC North would have something to say about that. I get it. But yeah, the Detroit Lions aren't going anywhere. They re-signed all of their studs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff, Penei Sewell, fixed the secondary. If any team can psychologically rebound from the way that season ended with giving away that NFC Championship game, I think it's Dan Campbell. Oh, by the way, probably the most underrated storyline in the NFC is Ben Johnson returning as coordinator. He makes that thing go. Jordan Love obviously was the best quarterback from mid-November on in all of the NFL and is only going to get better. A note on Jordan Love, too, and I'm going to have a story on him and the Packers at Go Long ahead of the season. Speaking to somebody who, let's just say he works with him every day, is around this quarterback day in and day out, he really pinpointed Jordan Love's strength as that ability to mess up, screw something up, get fooled, and then not get fooled again. Like the defense would throw something at him, whether it's a coverage, maybe the way they roll the safety over on a particular passing concept, whatever the case may be. If he gets fooled once, he's not fooled again. And isn't that exactly what we saw last year, where he was bad at times, very bad at times, the first half of the season? And his own GM at that press conference in so many words says, all right, game time, Jordan Love. You need to prove you're our guy or we're going to find somebody else. And then he turned it on. And I think that, yeah, there's going to be coordinators out there, defenses out there who are going to try to figure out his weaknesses and take advantage of those weaknesses. But I think Jordan Love has an ability to figure shit out. I think that's his greatest strength. So they're not going anywhere. I still like Chicago, though. I feel like Caleb Williams has a good enough coordinator in Shane Waldron. Wasn't always great in Seattle, but still had some answers built into that scheme. Comes from the Sean McVay tree, obviously. And this is still a players' league, right? Players win games. Coaches lose games. You say it all the time. And they've got the horses, right? And there's always going to be injuries. And I feel like with the horses they have, they can withstand an injury or two.
I think for Chicago to take this step, I think Detroit is firmly, they're either the best, one of the top two teams in that conference. But Green Bay, I get it with Jordan Love. I told you before, I just want to see a little more. I think there's still more for him to show consistency wise to really feel good, because he got away with some things last year that you can't always get away with. Now, that doesn't mean he's not doing some special things. He did. I need to make sure you're not going to do those other things that I saw that scare me with decision-making accuracy. There was some wild stuff I saw out of him early. To your point, November on, that was kind of insane. So I would say take your best out, take your worst out, right? That's the old saying. It kind of holds true. Take your 3 best games out, take your 3 worst games out in the NFL. Well, that was when it used to be 6, and then find out the rest. So my point of that was for Chicago to take that step quickly. If Jordan Love does have some inconsistency issues, then Chicago does become that, right away becomes, or Minnesota if they can knock on the door too, but in that division. That's how somebody could get above Green Bay if Jordan Love just takes a step backwards, which you said you don't see coming. And it's hard to see it coming after what he did. It was hard to believe in the playoffs to think that there's going to be a regression. I'm always a little skeptical. I need to see a little more.
Hey, it's about what you do in the playoffs at the end of the day. And that was a bad decision against San Francisco. Throw across your body. At that point, right, when all you really need to do is dink and dunk in today's NFL to get into field goal range in the 2-minute drill. is kind of automatic, right? This is something that good quarterbacks are able to do, let alone the best quarterbacks can do. Give them a couple timeouts, few first downs, boom, you're in field goal range. The way these kickers are today as well. That's probably, I know we're kind of going a different direction here too, but I was just talking to Connor Orr at the MMQB podcast. I brought up this to him where, like, for all of the innovative play call genius, X and O, just brilliance out there in a Kyle Shanahan, a Sean McVay. It's like you get to those moments, especially in the Super Bowl, and what do you see? You see Bill Belichick against Sean McVay just taking him to the woodshed, right? 3 points. They take that Vic Fangio blueprint that the Bears used on that Rams team, bring it to the Super Bowl, and McVay is just, his pants are, I don't know what to do. Kyle Shanahan against Andy Reid. Same thing. Get to overtime. Andy Reid and the Chiefs know what's up. They know the rules. The 49ers don't have a clue. I mean, I get it. Like you can schematically figure everything out that you possibly could in a regular season, even for a couple playoff games. The best of the very best own that pressure-packed moment, whether it's a coach or a quarterback. So as much as I love Jordan Love, you can't make that mistake in that game. You just can't. So we'll see in the NFC who can rise up. San Francisco, it's hard to count against them with the talent they have. If we're staying in the division, though, I think that Detroit, with Dan Campbell, you made a really good point there that they're not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes, Caleb Williams, I think, is set up to succeed. Cannot wait to see what he does in the NFL. Give me your mid-round setup to shine.
So I think this will keep it. We could probably go faster now because when I start with I'm about to bring up a fourth round selection. I'm going to start by saying if he makes their roster.
That's not a good way to start selling me here, Jim.
No, Tyler, that's the reality of fourth round selections, to be honest with you. The fourth round selections aren't guaranteed to make NFL teams. And I'm bringing out a fourth round selection for the San Francisco 49ers. Isaac Guerendo, running back, Louisville. So, bowl game, Louisville, USC. I find a way to bet the over in that game. And I don't watch a ton of college football, but bowl games, have some fun that time of year. So bet the over. It's going to be a fun game. You know there's no defenses. Well, guess who was a star in that game? The backup running back for Louisville. Yes, backup running back from Louisville, Isaac Guerendo. He was flying. So then it was just like, man, it was just straight speed. So then I see he runs 4.3 something at the combine. So, okay, here's where I'm going with this. The San Francisco 49ers, I'm picturing this guy. He played at Wisconsin for 4 years. He's always been a home run hitter, 4.3 speed. I like his size. You have one of the most creative offensive head coaches, Shanahan, finding value in a backup running back who has straight line speed and takes him in the fourth round. I'm paying attention to this guy. There must be some type of plan. They have a vision. Shanahan has a vision for this guy to take him in the fourth round. Now, he did some kickoff returns at Wisconsin. You know, he's a 4-year player at Wisconsin. But if you look at his stats at Wisconsin as well, he's still putting up 6 yards a carry. I mean, he is just home run hitter. He had 11 touchdowns this year in like 130 rushing attempts. So that's a guy that's matched up for success. Here's a straight line. Here's a coach who will know what he does well and put him in position to succeed. I was a part of Andy Reid's staffs and Sean Payton's staffs and was fortunate enough to be around those two guys who could always draft and put guys in the right position. I feel like Shanahan will do that for this player too. Now, when I say if he makes the team, Mitchell, their backup running back for San Fran, he had some, an injury history. So but he's a good number 2, Mitchell. I like Mitchell as a number 2. So I'm thinking maybe he has to find his way on special teams, blah, blah, blah. But I'm trying to be creative, Tyler. Fourth round, it gets tough.
Kyle Shanahan and running backs is a very interesting conversation to have because you're right. He can scheme up the best in the NFL when it comes to putting players in position to make plays. I'm not sure there's a better coach in football than Kyle Shanahan. Coaching is different than evaluation, though. You know that. And well, I'm not sure who was the driving force behind the draft pick, but look through Kyle Shanahan's history at running back. So in 2017, that was his first year. I remember somebody in the building telling me that he went to bat for Joe Williams, that the scouts did not like Joe Williams that much. They had red flags. And out of nowhere, Shanahan just drives him up the board. They take Joe Williams in the fourth round. Joe Williams does not have an NFL carry to his resume. Never even saw the field. Okay, so then the next running back that they drafted wasn't until 2021. Who did they take? Third round. Pretty high draft capital, right? Trey Sermon, Ohio State, bust. But in the sixth round of the same draft, Elijah Mitchell, who's been a steal out of Louisiana, right? The old Raging Cajuns. Okay, then you go to the next year. They take another running back with some premium draft capital. Tyron Davis Price. I don't know much at all about him. He's only carried the ball 40 times. Where is he? Do you know what team he even plays for right now, Jim?
Oh, I'll look him up right now. Keep
Same.
going because this is good.
The Eagles. He's with the Eagles, okay? So that didn't work out. And now you take Isaac Guerendo. I'm sorry.
No,
which it could go one way or the other here. And meanwhile, you traded for Christian McCaffrey along the way, and he's the best player in football, arguably. So for all of his draft capital that they've spent, they needed to trade for Christian McCaffrey.
It's the age-old. So when you go through all those running backs that they took ahead, the Mitchell one was good, where Mitchell outperformed Sermon. It was just like we talked about Trey Lance and Purdy. I mean, it's ridiculous. So how they're just whipping and hitting on later round picks. To your point, we don't know who's responsible. Adam Peters is now in Washington. I would think Shanahan, I would love to know, but my guess is Shanahan.
Oh, Shanahan runs he's got the final say.
He's got everything.
Without question.
Okay. Over Lynch.
Over Lynch, no doubt. I mean, they sing a harmonious tune, right?
I agree with you.
And I think there is a lot to that. I think they are on the same page and they work well together. Obviously, they work well together. They've been to 2 Super Bowls.
But I think back to Guerendo too, that Mitchell has that straight line ability as well. Like he hits. So I thought that's why, I don't know. Like I said, fourth round, a backup, and I watched him in the bowl game. So it all kind of, I like where he went. All right. Who you got, Tyler? Who's your next setup?
In the same vein, I'm going to go with a mid-round selection here. Jalen Wright, running back, Tennessee, to the Miami Dolphins. Similar to Guerendo, he can fly 4.38 at the combine at 210 pounds of muscle. I mean, this guy is beefy and he can move. He gets from point A to point B. It was a lot of fun learning about Jalen Wright. For a feature at Go Long. I can link it here as well if anybody wants to read. Here's what he said before the draft. I'm explosive. I'm a threat. I don't need a lot of touches to take to the house. If I see a seam and there's nobody in front of me, I'm gone. There's not a lot of running backs that have that, and I'm saying that humbly. I'm somebody that can get into the game and change the whole game. He can fly. I mean, this guy is fast. Okay, so it's one thing to have that kind of speed. I think his 10-yard split in the 40 was best amongst all running backs at the combine the last 2 years. So that includes Devon Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs. And to drop him into that Miami offense with Achane, with Raheem Mostert, with Tyreek Hill, with Jalen Waddle, Mike McDaniel figuring it all out schematically. Hey, I like Miami just leaning into their identity, right? Like they know what they want to be. They want speed unleashed in every possible way on offense. That the draft pick, I'm sure it raised eyebrows for one Raheem Mostert. He said as much to an effect, but I give the Dolphins credit. You know, that shouldn't stop you from drafting a faster. I mean, I could not believe that he fell to the 4th round. I mean, this struck me as the best running back in the entire draft. And for him to get to Miami, it just doesn't seem fair.
You did the famous, couldn't believe he was there when he was.
Yes, I did.
LeBron James drafted, just said that. I didn't know he was a GM for LA, but he did say he could not believe that the player they took in the 1st round from Tennessee was there at 17. He couldn't believe it. Tyler, I know this, the running back tennis, he is a dog. He's a JYD. He is from that Durham, North Carolina area.
Yeah.
Promise you. Goes to Ted. I know, I like this selection by you. I wonder to your point, I didn't study him enough as a player to see why he would not be a higher pick. For you to say he could be the best running back, that's pretty cool to think. Where I picked a guy where I think he has a tough time making the roster. I like where you took a shot here. I'm going to pay attention to him.
His dad really put him into track early. Like he just knew, I want to build this specimen. He was running the 100, the 200, the 400 was really his race, which I think is interesting. That dead sprint for a full lap. I think it applies to running back. It gives him a different level of endurance too. I mean, let alone his personal story, which is wild, being homeless, sleeping on the floor for a couple of years. I just love the fit. I just think that he is going to be used somehow by this coach. Now, as we sit here, as we record right now, Tua Tagovailoa has not been signed to an extension. Now, I would assume it gets done. They figure out a middle ground. And when it does get done, I mean, maybe this apprehension, this delay, this pause, whatever it is, maybe it is telling. And the Dolphins have some doubts with whatever Tua is asking for and David Mugoleta. But does this Dolphins team, this identity that they're leaning into, is it smart for January football to you? Because I mean, we've seen it the last couple of years where they're scoring 70 points on Denver. Tua's leading the NFL in passing. Tyreek Hill was maybe an MVP candidate up until he had an injury late in the season. There's a lot to love about this team the first 3.5 months of a season, and then injuries strike, especially on defense last year for this team. The quarterback struggles in the cold, which is a problem in the AFC with Baltimore and Cincinnati and Buffalo and Kansas City and all of these venues that they're going to have to play in. So from a front office point of view, we always want to get that from you, Jim, as a former front office man yourself. How do you like their approach to just lean into this speed and trying to win a track game when the teams you have to get past in the AFC, it might be more of a slugfest in January in the snow with the wind and whatever the hell you have to plan?
You need to build your team for you. You can't predict weather. You can't predict the future, away games, seedings, who you're going to play in the playoffs. To your point, yes, there's a chance you're going to play in bad weather in Buffalo. You know that every year in the division. Okay, but this, look where you rank offensively. Like, you are a monster every week. You are basically, you're going to be able to compete in the playoffs right away. The key that they're discussing right now is Tua good enough to get you over the top in the playoffs. You can't talk about weather. Is he good enough? And if he's not good enough, then yes, this is going to be a tough decision. Like, they're going to have to find a way to say, is he the issue? Because that surrounding cast, we have to be able to take the regular season numbers, have to correlate postseason. There can't be a drop because the quarterback doesn't have the arm or it's a windy day. Yeah. Now that extreme weather is extreme weather. That goes for both teams.
Yeah.
Like that crap that they dealt with in KC. I mean, it's not like it's easy for Mahomes either. So I guess my point is you drafted him. You believed in him. You put up the numbers with him. You're keeping him. Like they're keeping Tua. I mean, as far as he's going to get his money, it's just like Baltimore and Lamar. Like I feel the same way. Like what you already know you can get to a certain point with him. That means you keep him.
It probably is a more nuanced debate too. I'm thinking back to that loss to the Chiefs and that bitter, frigid cold.
I mean,
let me just look it up here. How cold did it really get? It was the fourth coldest game in NFL history. Okay, yeah, that's pretty cold. So you're in that game.
Extreme. It's like you can't not sign him because of that game. Like
right. But I also think it's kind of lazy just to put it all on Tua as well. Like it was. The final score was 26-7, and they were kind of playing from behind, but it was a 16-7 game at halftime, and you're passing constantly. I mean, Tua put the ball in the air 39 times. Raheem Mostert had 8 carries. Devon Achane had 6 carries. They didn't really make much of an attempt to run the ball, and maybe part of the problem is your style of running isn't conducive to the elements and to the playoffs, because it definitely is a certain style. It's not necessarily north and south, right? Power, like the Bills kind of shifted to late last year. But whatever the reason may be, like I have a hard time just saying, oh, the Dolphins stink in January because Tua stinks. There's a lot more to it. You know, the year before he was hurt, he didn't play at the end of the year when things were rolling. And look, he did play well in the cold in Buffalo 2 years ago in the snow. You know, that wasn't ideal in the regular season. He played well enough to win most of that game. So it's definitely an interesting debate the Dolphins are having right now. I mean, his representatives and the team, they're going back and forth on this stuff.
No, he's getting paid. He's getting paid. He should get paid. We talked about it. He's not Josh Allen. There aren't many. He's not Aaron Rodgers in his own division. He is the third best quarterback in his division. That's who you're getting ready to pay. That's a hard swallow for Miami.
Let's not forget who was on the field defensively for the Dolphins by the postseason as well. And I get it. Injuries. I know.
No. But what I was going to say was this goes back to Tua, though. He's going to need a great defense. He needs a lot of quarterbacks do. He's going to need the full support to max out his skill set.
Justin Houston, Bruce Irvin. They were playing in a playoff game. We all love Eli Apple, but Eli Apple probably isn't who you want out there one-on-one.
Did we just rewind to like 2015? Those names are Irvin, Houston, Apple. We just took our time in back to 2016 or something.
So even though Christian Wilkins goes to the Raiders, and I totally get not giving him that kind of money for a defensive tackle, for sure. This is going to be a better defense in Miami. I mean, you're going to get Bradley Chubb back. You're going to get Jalen Phillips back. They signed Calais Campbell. He's still playing. Jordan Poyer, he's not what he used to be. But man, that forced fumble he had against the Chiefs at the 1 yard line alone. We talk about those moments in the playoffs you need. He has been in those moments. So I'm intrigued. Jordan Brooks at linebacker and David Long Jr. perhaps the meanest, nastiest linebacker in the sport.
Defensive players got their wish. Vic Fangio's out. Anthony Weaver, who we loved in Buffalo, he was our defensive line coach, who I considered him, what he went through with our defensive line was incredible. Dealing with personalities like Marcel, Mario, Kyle Williams, and Jerry Hughes. Anthony Weaver was outstanding.
What are they getting in Anthony Weaver?
They're getting whatever they didn't like in Vic, they're getting somebody who is going to absolutely be tuned in with them as people as well as players.
Yeah. I think that's the big difference. Just who I've spoken with on that defense, it's a better relationship between the coaches, the coordinator, and the players. They were quite pleased that Vic Fangio was removed, left, resigned, mutually parted ways, right? That's the, don't you just love that term? Mutually parted ways. It's like Vic Fangio and Mike McDaniel and Steven Roth. Everybody's holding hands and dancing. Maybe they're doing a little salsa dance, and then they just mutually part ways. And Vic Fangio goes off to Philadelphia. But yes, they're very excited for Anthony Weaver. That's a great point. I had forgotten about his stint with you guys in Buffalo. That D line did something right. Yeah, that's a lot of personalities to handle too.
I was sitting in on some intense closed door meetings with Marcel, Anthony Weaver, Doug Marrone, Doug Whaley, Russ Brandon. I was in that meeting as well. And it was a good learning experience for me. A lot of times I was just mouth shut, observe. I learned a lot. These players go through a lot. People don't, it's just like every other job. There is the home life, whatever it is for everybody in any profession can get into your work life. You try to separate as best you can, but anyway, it's part of the deal. It's just every other business has it in the NFL and professional sports. They all have it too. Everybody has a home life.
So let's hear it. Just, what was everybody going through personally that you can?
Marcel's was I think the stories on Marcel are out there pretty documented. Yeah. I mean, really documented. I was just a part of it. The real life as they were happening, where he was losing, he had drama, like family member drama, death, money issues, just nonstop. It was one thing after the next. And, that he handled it like a man, Marcel, I'm talking about, to show up like he tried his best to handle everything. And the support that I think the Buffalo showed him was good too. I think the front office and they always supported Marcel if he needed to go home for something. I thought that was good too. And I think most teams do that for the players too. I don't think that's like crazy, but they just deal with a lot. And sometimes for me as a scout, and then I go into that director of personnel role, as a scout, sometimes after the draft, you're moving on to the next draft class and they become just another, you're writing reports and you pay attention to the players that just got drafted, but you forget that, then, hey, they have lives too. And that's why you do all the background. And Marcel's was known coming out of the draft. I mean, you knew he had a lot to deal with, and it stayed true. He always had to deal with it. We should try to get him on. I bet he would come on with us.
100% he would.
Actually,
let's do it.
Actually, he'd be better to talk about Anthony Weaver.
Let's get Marcel on. And yeah, I'll never forget that conversation with him.
Anyway, so that's where that went.
Was died.
It's unreal. It's just unreal. So anyway, yeah, that was good on that went down
our last two here.
Yeah, these are a little quicker. All right, 7th round. I did a 7th round quarterback, Michael Pratt Tulane.
Ooh, okay.
So I studied him. I was able to watch him this year. I wanted to watch him because I heard some people buzzing. He went to the Senior Bowl. He was Conference Player of the Year, which I love. Love for a quarterback who battled back from an injury and still performed at a high level so he can fight through adversity. When you watch him on tape, he is built to be a backup quarterback. I'm telling you, he's not physically gifted, but it's everything else. It's like right out of the Chase Daniel. I'm going to be Conference Player of the Year. I can do whatever you need. I'm going to be the smartest guy in the room, make every throw accurate. I'm not saying he couldn't be a starter someday, but I could see where you would take a shot on this player in the 7th round and say, hey, he could develop into a number 2 right behind Jordan Love forever. And we're talking about set up for success. Man, Green Bay taking a quarterback right now. That's a pretty good recipe.
I like it. Right. You've got the right coaches on staff, starting with Matt LaFleur and what they did with Jordan Love. Going to learn something from Jordan Love. Sean Clifford kicking around, I suppose. But I like the fact that this team is still drafting quarterbacks. You should.
They always do. I love it too. Yep. All right. So who you got?
Yeah, I'll keep mine quick too. Let's stick with another quarterback in that 7th round. Or no, this would have been the 6th round. Joe Milton, Tennessee, by way of Michigan to those New England Patriots. They draft Drake May, 3rd overall, and then they take the flyer on Mr. Milton. So I believe, right, he's like 6'5", 244. If you were to create a quarterback physically in a lab, it'd be him. He's got some athleticism. He's got a big arm. I don't know. It's a flyer. It's a flyer worth taking. I just like it when teams draft a quarterback high and then they still draft another one, because why not? Why not draft another one? Speaking of Dan Snyder and Washington, right? Like, he loved RG3. And speaking of Mike Shanahan at the time, and Kyle on staff, really liked Kirk Cousins. Took Kirk Cousins, 4th round. And who's still playing in the NFL? Who's on ESPN? Kirk Cousins is the one breaking the bank every year, it seems. So, no, I'm not saying that Joe Milton's going to be Kirk Cousins, but I like Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo, Alex Van Pelt deciding to just draft another quarterback. And it's obviously a developmental pick. He's a project. And if he turns into something, maybe you do what Ron Wolf and those Packers did. You trade him for an asset. You get something for him. He's Matt Hasselbeck. He's Aaron Brooks. He's Ty Detmer, Mark Brunell. I mean, they were drafting quarterbacks every year. So, yes. Well done, New England.
You bringing up that the RG3, Kirk Cousins, and Shanahan was the head coach. The Shanahans, they have to be gamblers. Those guys live right. They need to go to the casino. Like, both their careers, they whiffed on, not whiff, because RG3 wasn't a complete whiff. That was more, I mean, he went through the injuries, and I don't know. Well, that's debatable. But bottom line is they were able to be saved by, in the same draft class, a later round quarterback. That's hard to predict.
I mean, speaking of the gambling, remember the offense that they created for RG3? He was the rookie of the year, not Russell Wilson, not Andrew Luck.
People forget.
It was RG3. Yeah, he was unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Man, we said, don't overthink these ridiculous physical talents. Like, Vince Young, RG3, they came in and dominated. Both were on teams that maybe didn't have the best setup for them. That's the big, we could get into all that, but.
And if we bring it full circle, I'm trying to think of the timing on it, but he hurts his knee late in that season. And here's Mike Shanahan and that coaching staff putting him back out there, right? He gets into the playoff game against Seattle and wrecks his knee. And he never really recovers. So, I don't know. Like, there's something kind of missing in some of these great coaches. And that maybe that's a blind spot there. No, I'm kind of fusing Mike and Kyle Shanahan together as the same person, and Mike Shanahan did win 2 Super Bowls, but that is definitely a counterfactual. Like, what would have happened? What would have happened if they just thought of the long term and helped RG3 protect himself, sat him down, didn't put him in that playoff game, took the off season to do whatever he had to do health wise, surgically, rehab wise, and he was a shell of himself the next year in 2013, I believe.
Those are good ones. Good to, the Shanahans, the one thing, they will always put up stats regardless. And that's why I think we're paying attention. We always we're picking those guys. Like, they're going to put up stats wherever they go. They have some other things coaching wise you can't explain sometimes, but offensive stats going to happen. Shanahans will put up stats.
Thank you, everyone, for watching, listening, reading. We greatly appreciate it. Be sure to rate and review the pod wherever you listen. Greatly appreciate that. And if you'd like to subscribe to golongtd.com to access everything, it is a fine time to do so with what we have coming very soon. So thanks again. We'll be back soon here on the Go Long Show with my co-host Jim Monis, as well as a one-on-one conversation with Wyatt Teller of the Cleveland Browns, who, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. If we were to create a silhouette emblem for Go Long, it probably is Wyatt Teller bodying somebody, pancaking a poor, helpless soul at linebacker out wide, or maybe a DB. That's probably it. Yeah, that was a fun story to write a few years back, hanging out at Wyatt Teller's whiskey bar. So yeah, we're going to bring him back on the show, get into the Cleveland Browns, Deshaun Watson, and Wyatt Teller himself, kind of where he's at with his career, with his life. He's got a son. He's got a baby girl on the way. So I don't think we're going to drink whiskey. I think when we did the happy hour with Wyatt Teller with subscribers, since that story, we all got a little too sauced up, and maybe he was letting it rip a little too much. So I don't know if he's going to bust out the whiskey, but I will definitely encourage it. Right? A little truth serum. That's what we want.
I wouldn't know anything about that, Tyler. I wouldn't know anything about it.
Me either. All right. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. We'll catch you next time.